clocks exist, time doesn't exist. So there's and a lot of them understood that, and even some of the ancient sages understood the reality that we have, that we're living in here, was actually not true reality. They called it sleepy time or dream time. That being awake was the dream time, and so they understood that this is a holographic illusion in a lot of ways, in a lot of different ways. The Akashic records, in particular, it goes way back even into some of the ancient Indian texts, and it's referred to as this record that exists, this energetic plane where information exists, that's got the conscious thought of every single entity, sentient being in the entire universe. Every thought wave exists there and is stored there in this gigantic, energetic computational computer system, if you want to call it that, just to make it, give it an easy way to see it. And so this Akashic record has spelled out everything that you have done, everything that you will do, and everything that you, are doing now, because time is basically, it doesn't exist. So the past, present, and future happen all at once in higher dimensions. So all the information about yourself and what you've done and going to do and are doing is in the Akashic record. Thoth calls it the Book of Life, and that made it into the biblical text. Obviously, religious texts call it the Book of Life, but the Akashic record and the Book of Life, to me, same exact thing. And so it's likened to, really, what I was saying earlier, is that everything that's happening is energetic in this entire realm. All that energy is stored in this energetic grid. And just like, they found that black holes, initially we thought that if something went into a black hole, it would be torn apart. If something went into a black hole, it would be torn apart. If something went into a black hole, it would be torn apart, shred up and pulled into pieces. But then we learned that when something goes into a black hole, because information can't be lost, something goes into a black hole, because information can't be lost, the information is actually stored in the event horizon, stores all the data of whatever it is that's going into the black hole. And so we know that the universe is a natural data storage. So again, as above, so below, we've got USB drives. That's just a below of the massive above. All we do is replicate what already exists on higher planes of existence. And so that's what the Akashic record is. It's a storage medium for information about everything, about every sentient being in the entire universe. And I do believe that the ancients knew that time was an illusion, that the way that we perceive time now has become so mechanical. We've got to go to this meeting. I'm looking at my clock. I've got to get to another podcast right after this one, and I'm trying to calculate what I've got to do after that. So we're on this mechanical system, and we're on this system where we kind of really become slaves to time, unfortunately. But I think that back in the ancient times, the way that everything was set up, everything was more set back, laid back, and destinies were ordained and things like that. It was a much different way of perceiving time back then.
Yeah, exactly. It's interesting because we see things in often such a linear way, right? I did this yesterday, and I'm going to do this tomorrow. But like Billy said, that's actually a third-dimensional, linear way to look at things. Most of what takes up the multiverse, right, which means the layered universe of possibilities, is made up of non-physical things. It's energy. It's, like Billy said, the storage of all thoughts, everything that's ever been discussed, and someone thinks, oh, I just came up with something. No, that term that some people know is called nothing new under the sun. The ancients once said that everything that we think we're discovering has already been thought, and that it's all already existing because time is an illusion, and that everything is a giant circle. Okay, and what that means is if you start to get out into dimensional thinking and you start to think in a higher way, right? You start to think about realms and spaces that exist beyond what's called the five senses linear world that we see in front of us, right? We have five senses, we see 7 colors of the visible light spectrum, but there's so much else out there that we can't perceive, and one of those things are things like dimensions. So what happens when you move from a third dimensional thinking? So if you go into a meditation session and and you're deep in there, and you're surrounded by crystals, and you get into a deep thought, and you feel that you are no longer just your physical body, but you are just like an orb of consciousness that is non-physical, like your spirit. Okay, you've now broken out of the third dimension, and you're now in the fourth dimension, fifth dimension, with the sixth being what perhaps is the highest that as humans currently in our form we can achieve. And what happens is the further you go out of the third dimension, the more time becomes an illusion and disappears. It becomes what's called instantaneous time, meaning that all that matters, the past actually doesn't matter at all. The future doesn't matter. It's only the moment. They realize that the moment you're in is the only thing that exists. So the way that they would reflect time in a place like Göbekli Tepe in Turkey is they would only track time based on basically the wobble of the earth, known as the equinoxes, okay? The shifts that occur when the earth is wobbling on its axis, which constellations it faces for a 2,100 year period. That was time for them. So they were called them ages, right? And they knew that they were in this age, and then this age would come. And each of those ages would be a cyclical nature of polarity. It would be a dualistic nature. So every age would go from a positive to a negative and vice versa. And they knew that. And so when they would basically allow them to look at ages ahead and predict where that society would go and where those things would happen. And they could even predict things like cataclysms that were going to be coming and figuring out when things were going to occur based on the alignment with the cosmos and the sun and basically the galactic plane of everything swinging through.